2020, so make of that what you will.
Maybe it'll be reversed by the 13th.
I don't know what y'all are talking about. 13's my lucky number. I graduated 13th in my high school class. It's my lucky number. All right. So the humanistic perspective, as we kind of talked about on Wednesday, is all about meeting your potential. So it's all about fostering growth and helping people reach their potential and their need for unconditional positive regard. So remember that unconditional positive regard is basically the idea that we all have this need to be loved, and we all have this need to be accepted for just as we are, with no conditions on that. We all have this need. So the humanistic perspective is all about us trying to nurture each other and help each other grow by helping each other get those needs met, by being genuine, by being empathic, and by being accepting. So one of the things that's been really great about the humanistic perspective is that we have this huge focus on having a positive self-concept. We talk a lot more about empathy. And additionally, there's this notion of reaching potential. And as I talked about last time, this has had a huge impact on how we provide therapy to people. It has a huge impact on how we teach. And it has a huge impact on how we work. But there are some problems. So of course, Dr. Gilchrist would be remiss if she didn't talk about bad science or lack of science. And just as the psychodynamic perspective or the psychoanalytic perspective has the problem that a lot of these don't have a scientific basis, well, the humanistic perspective really doesn't either. What do we mean by unconditional positive regard? Where did we get this idea? How can we scientifically test it? A lot of these concepts are incredibly vague and they lack a scientific basis. Now, the concepts have gotten much better in terms of how we measure it, how we analyze it, but they didn't necessarily get their start in science. Now, some people will say that emphasis on the individual can backfire. So it's part of the reason why that you'll sometimes hear, usually older folks, complain about millennials and Gen Z. And just to kind of put this into perspective, I'm a millennial. I mean, to be fair, I'm an older millennial. I'm like right on the edge between millennial and Generation X. But I'm a millennial. And one of the things that I kind of talked about last time is that it's been said, oh, millennials are so entitled. They grew up in a generation where everybody got a trophy. I will remind you, kids are not stupid. I got a participation ribbon for coming in dead last at the school's field day in elementary school. And let me tell you, that ribbon did not make me feel better at all. Kids know a pity ribbon or a pity trophy when they see one. I would also ask you, whose idea was it to give the kids the trophies and the ribbons anyway? Mind blown. But we do know that as a culture, we are becoming a little bit more narcissistic. So I'm actually in the process of listening to an audiobook right now called The New Science of Narcissism. Our culture has become increasingly materialistic, and we've also become increasingly individualistic. And that is a breeding ground for narcissism, self-focus, and self-absorption. Now, I'm not saying that we're all running around with narcissism. I don't think that's true, but emphasis on the individual can backfire to the point where you only care about yourself and you don't really care a lot about the people around you. And then finally, the humanistic perspective basically assumes that our highest potential is a good thing, and that we are fundamentally good at our core, but something bad happens to us and we kind of lose our way. So some of you may not like this because just as the psychoanalytic perspective was too negative and thus unrealistic, this is similarly unrealistic, but for a very different way. You are capable of bad things. We are all capable of doing terrible things. And I think it can be really important to understand those negative parts of ourselves. And we are capable of evil things, and we need to be aware of that and make sure that we don't do that. So now we're actually going to talk about probably the best part of talking about personality research. We're going to talk about personality traits. So we're going to talk about how we get to this idea of using all of these different traits or these different words to describe how we are. So this book that I was listening to this morning actually had a whole chapter talking about personality traits. So this has been fresh in my mind this morning, and I'm really happy to share this with you today. So the trait perspective. So we've talked about the psychoanalytic theory, which is all about how personality develops. We've talked about the humanistic perspective, which is how we can help our personality to be nurtured and to grow in ourselves and others. Now, the trait perspective is talking about describing all of the different types of personalities that we actually see. So when we talk about personality traits, we are talking about a unique constellation of durable dispositions and very consistent ways of behaving. These are traits, and this makes our personality. So we are all made up of these different types of descriptors, and we're all different in that perspective. So for example, and you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, you can hop on the Discord or hop on Zoom. Would it be a stretch to say that one of my personality traits is that I'm enthusiastic? Would you consider me an enthusiastic person? Yeah. Let's see. Yes, and I got to tell you, so if you've occasionally wondered if this enthusiasm is real or if it's just an act because I'm teaching, I got to tell you, I actually got it honest when I was in kindergarten, when I was 6 years old. I held up 5 fingers for 6. But when I was 6 years old, my kindergarten teacher actually did kind of a goofy version of like superlatives. So you know how like when you're in high school, you get like most likely to succeed and stuff like that. Well, when I was in kindergarten, my teacher dubbed me most enthusiastic. I got this honestly, y'all. I came with this. This is absolutely a part of me. So some different personality traits that might describe you or people you know include things like honest, dependable, moody, impulsive, lazy, antagonistic, stingy, and all of these other different adjectives that we use to describe the people that we encounter. So one of the things that's actually kind of interesting about personality traits is that some of them hang together. So somebody who is kind and nice, so traits like nice and kind and cooperative, those all seem to hang together, don't they? They all seem to fit together really well. Now, likewise, mean, angry, suspicious, some of those kind of hang together as well. And so I don't know if you remember me talking a little bit about this when we talked about intelligence tests. How many of you remember me talking about factor analysis? And I believe that the example that I gave was groceries. So the idea basically being when you make a grocery list with a lot of different items, you can basically form these little clusters or factors based on where in the store you get them. So if you have pork chops and chicken and beef on your list, you can group those together into the factor of meat. If you have grapes, apples, bananas, bok choy, you can group those under the heading of produce. So the idea is that some, like grocery items, some personality traits tend to hang together. And so researchers have really been interested in lumping similar personality traits together into what we call factors. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of those different theories. So one of the first major theories to look at these factors is Eysenck and Eysenck's two-factor theory. So they basically believed that all of the different personality traits that we see are basically made from two major factors. The first major factor is extroversion versus introversion, and then emotional stability versus instability. So somebody who is emotionally stable, just so we're clear, we are talking about somebody who's pretty calm, pretty level-headed, pretty balanced. Somebody who is emotionally unstable, we're going to tend to focus on them as they're kind of looking for threats. They're a little anxious, and sometimes they're a little oversensitive. Like, that's me using the word. I don't actually think they are oversensitive, but they might be hypersensitive to certain types of threats. So when we cross these two different factors, we get a variety of different traits. So we have these four different quadrants. So somebody who is stable and extroverted, there's leadership. I don't actually know that leadership is a personality trait, but we'll kind of roll with it. Carefree, lively, easygoing, responsive, talkative, outgoing, and sociable. As we start moving toward unstable, we get active, optimistic, impulsive, changeable, excitable, aggressive, restless, and touchy. Now let's do this on the same side for introversion. So when we're stable, we have calm, even-tempered, reliable, controlled, peaceful, thoughtful, careful, passive. As we start moving toward greater emotional instability, we have quiet, unsociable, reserved, pessimistic, sober, rigid, anxious, and moody. Postnasal drip is fun. Let me see if I can get my straw under here. There we go. There we go. Much better. All right. But here's the thing. Two factors doesn't really seem like it does a very good job of describing all of the different types of personality traits that we see. And it also doesn't really describe a lot of the variability that we see in people. There are a lot of personality traits that are not even listed here. So it's kind of clear that when we're describing personality, we need more than two factors, but we probably don't need much more than 4 or 5. And it turns out that McRae and Costa have basically determined that we have 5 major personality factors. So these earlier models don't really do a very good job of telling the whole story, and rather the 5-factor model does a better job of describing your personality and all of the different types of personalities that we see. So we're going to talk about each of these in greater detail, but the major factors can basically be lumped into these: conscientiousness, agreeableness, neuroticism, openness or openness to experience, and extroversion. If you're having trouble remembering these factors, remember the word canoe, C-A-N-O-E. Ocean will also work. So let's talk about what each of these look like. So one thing that I am going to mention is that each of these traits or each of these factors kind of operates on a continuum. It's a spectrum for each of these traits. So here's what each of these will look like. So conscientiousness is basically all about how careful, how thoughtful, how organized, and how disciplined you are. So somebody who is very high in conscientiousness will show up as being organized or careful or disciplined. Somebody who is low in conscientiousness is going to be a little bit more disorganized, careless, and impulsive. If you are the kind of person that is always turning in your work like a few minutes before the deadline, you might consider upping your conscientiousness. But don't worry, conscientiousness does tend to improve as you get older. Agreeableness is how well or how easily you cooperate with other people. So somebody who is very high in agreeableness are going to be very soft-hearted, they're going to be trusting, they're going to be very helpful. Now, on the other hand, somebody who is low in agreeableness, which is sometimes referred to as disagreeableness or antagonism, are typically going to be ruthless, possibly suspicious, unhelpful, untrusting, uncooperative, and so on. Neuroticism is just another way of talking about emotional stability versus emotional instability that we saw in the Isaac and Isaac two-factor theory. So somebody who is very, very high in neuroticism, they're going to be highly emotionally unstable. And this can include personality traits such as being anxious, insecure, self-pitying. So this person may potentially constantly be looking for potential threat. On the other hand, somebody who is low in neuroticism and thus high in emotional stability are going to feel very calm, very secure, and pretty satisfied with themselves. Openness to experience is all about your willingness to try new things and to be creative. So somebody with a very high openness to experience, they are going to be very imaginative, they're going to be really creative, they have a preference for variety, they like to try new things, and they're pretty independent. Somebody with low openness to experience are going to be more traditional. They're going to be conservative, not necessarily in a political sense, but rather in a social or a personal sense. They're very practical. They have a preference for routine. They tend to be a little bit more conforming. They're more likely to be a little bit more traditional. And then finally, we have our extroversion. So high extroversion, that includes people who are sociable, possibly fun-loving, affectionate. Remember too that they get their energy by being around other people. And then somebody who is low in extroversion, AKA introverted, are going to be more retiring, a little bit more sober. So by sober, we're not talking about alcohol. They're going to be they're not going to be like, they're going to be like the opposite of me with the bouncity bounce. And then a little bit more reserved. So think about where you fall on each of these spectra. And there are actually tests that you can take that can tell you how much you fit on each of these factors. And in this case, 5 really seems like a perfect number. So here are some questions that you might actually have about the big 5. So how stable are these traits? Generally, they're pretty stable in adulthood, but they are going to change over time. So as you age, you are probably going to become a little less open to experience. Like even now, like when I see memes or things like that, or when technology changes, I can tell where I'm getting to the age where I'm like, I remember back when we had floppy disks. This is too much change and it scares me. I don't like it. So I can tell I'm getting to that age where I'm becoming a little less open to trying new things and new ideas. We do know that as you age, you do become a little bit more conscientious, probably because you have to have a job and your job will require you to be conscientious. And then you also become a bit more agreeable and more cooperative. How heritable are these? So again, we're returning to this concept of heritability. Now remember that heritability is not about you or any individual. When we talk about heritability, we're looking at the variability in the population. And so, are you doing okay over there? Okay. Will I need to nudge you at all at any point? No. Okay. Okay. Well, I'll check your legs then too. So when we talk about heritability, we're talking about the variability that we see across persons. So one person might be more introverted than another, one person might be more agreeable than another. So what explains this variation that we see in the population? And it turns out for each of these factors, it's about 50%, which means that a sizable proportion of the variability that we see is genetic. So like I said, I'm enthusiastic. I'm pretty sure this is how I am wired. I don't think the environment changed anything in me to make me more enthusiastic. I have pretty much always been this way. But it also means that for the variation that we see in personality traits, culture and our society also play a pretty huge role. Do we find these in other cultures? Absolutely. So this does a pretty good job of explaining personality traits for a wide range of people and populations. So how do we assess our traits? Oftentimes we will do what are called personality inventories. So one thing that I will mention about the personality inventories, we are not talking about something like a BuzzFeed quiz or like a quiz that you might find in the back of Cosmopolitan. These don't really have much validity beyond the standard, like, does it look like it would fit? Yes. Most personality inventories that have been developed by researchers have been very carefully researched, very carefully sourced, and are designed to have really good validity and reliability. So personality inventories are often going to be questionnaires, things like true, false, or agree and disagree, that assess several traits at once. And here's where I kind of get into the Myers-Briggs. So I am going to share this with you later, but I will probably have to remove the video because of a copyright claim. But most of you know about the Myers-Briggs. I do briefly want to touch on it. How many of you are familiar with the show Adam Ruins Everything? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, it's a show that's basically about debunking different ideas that we have. So I am going to do Adam Ruins Myers-Briggs. Okay, so I'll show that in a minute. I saw something in the chat. Okay, good. All right, then y'all will like this, I think. All right. Okay, so so yeah, the Myers-Briggs is widely used, but I would also add from a scientific perspective, there have been some questions about its reliability. So sometimes you will take the test and you will get one personality type, and then you'll take it again and you'll get another. So the retest reliability is really not very good. But thankfully, we have other types of personality inventories that do assess different types of traits. So here's one example. This is what's called the MMPI, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. It is the most widely used, and it's largely used for personality disorders. And so one of the ways that they tested this, and this is a very good way to design and develop your tests, is that they would empirically pick some items. So they would test these items on different types of people. So they would test people who were potentially very high in psychopathy and then low in something like narcissism. And then they would select the items that best discriminated between those different types of groups of people. So here's kind of an example. You do not need to write this down. So this is what the MMPI kind of looks at. So again, these are largely for personality disorders. So hypochondriasis. So if you're kind of a hypochondriac, you're constantly worried about your health. Depression, hysteria, psychopathic deviancy, masculinity and femininity, paranoia, psychasthenia, so anxiety and guilt, schizophrenia, hypomania, and social introversion. So the idea here basically being that these items were developed by giving people who had these actual problems, these different test questions, and then only using the ones that somebody who's depressed is going to score really highly on the depression questions, but they're probably not going to score very highly on the hypomania questions. So you look for the questions that best separate these groups. So let's talk about astrology. So folks, it is Scorpio season. Does somebody here, is anybody in the chat or on Zoom a Scorpio? Do you have a birthday coming up? Does anybody have a birthday coming up? Okay, let me see. Okay, all right. Thalia, I'm going to go, Thalia, I'm going to go ahead and pick you. So I'm going to read a description of a Scorpio, and I want you to tell me if you feel like that's pretty accurate, okay? So let me kind of read this, and let's see if this describes you pretty well. Let me see. All right. So here are some items, and I kind of want you to tell me how much each of these apply to you. You have a great need for other people to like and admire you. Would you feel like that's pretty accurate? Put yes or no in the chat. Okay, so you said yes. You have a tendency to be critical of yourself. Yes. You have a great deal of unused capacity, which you have not yet turned to your advantage. So it's all about meeting your potential. Do you think there's some potential you haven't reached yet? I guess. I'll count that as a yes. While you have some personality weaknesses, you're generally able to compensate for them. Okay. At times, you have serious doubts as to whether you have made the right decision or done the right thing. Okay. You prefer a certain amount of change and variety and become dissatisfied when hemmed in by restrictions and limitations. No? Okay. You pride yourself as an independent thinker and do not accept other statements without satisfactory proof. Okay. At times, you are extroverted, affable, and sociable, while at other times you are introverted, wary, and reserved. Okay, so Thalia, let me ask you in the chat, how are you kind of feeling? Do you feel like this describes you pretty well? Okay, other people in the chat, here's my question. Do you think that describes you pretty well? Do you feel like this described you pretty well, even though it wasn't your horoscope? Okay, and here's why. So D says yes, and here is why. Thalia, I wasn't trying to trick you, but I gave statements that are basically true of most people. I did not actually give you a horoscope. I gave you a list of statements that were used in a research study by Bertram Forer. So this is sometimes what's referred to as the Barnum effect or the Forer effect. So let me tell you a little bit about what he did. He gave this basic description to about 39 psychology students in his class, sort of like I did here. And they were told that they were each getting a brief personality vignette based on test results that they had gotten. So they were believing that they were getting something that was personally developed specifically and uniquely for them. And then 1 week later, Forer basically gave a student that individualized sketch and asked them to rate on how well it applied. Here's the catch. He gave the description that I just gave to Thalia to everyone. Everybody got the same thing, and everybody thought that it described them pretty well. So this is what's referred to as either the Barnum effect, because it was originally kind of applied to P.T. Barnum, who never actually said that there was a sucker born every minute, but people like to apply it to him. But this is kind of how horoscopes work and how palm readers work. what we tend to find is that you are very willing to accept descriptions of you as being true when they're true of most people. Most of us are going to have times where we're very extroverted or times where we're really introverted. Most of us feel like we have some unused potential. These things are generally true of most people, but we believe that it's really special for us. Let me see what we got in the chat. Hugh Jackman? Oh, The Greatest Showman. Ah. Okay, please don't make me sing This Is Me. I can't hit those high notes. So what we tend to find is that this effect is much stronger when it is favorable. So individuals will give high accuracy ratings to things that are supposedly tailored to their personality, when the truth is that they're true of most people. So this is also true for things like horoscopes and palm readers and crystal ball gazers. And one of the other big benefits that palm readers and crystal ball gazers have, or mediums have, is they do what's called a cold reading. So are y'all ready for another Adam Ruins Everything clip? I think you are. We're going to talk about how Adam ruins psychics. Okay. And it's basically the same sort of idea. You keep things very vague and you let people fill in the missing information for you. So Adam ruins psychics. They make fun of the Long Island medium. Oh, the Long Island medium.
Shut up, okay? Welcome back to the Jersey Sharacle. I transcend dimensions, I speak to spirits, I live off exit 9 off the turnpike. So, today I have been summoned to the home of an adorable little boy and his adult friend who he barely knows.
My name is Stuart, and I'm 12 years old. I'd say I'm a pretty happy kid. That is, until it showed up. Its name is Adam, and he's making Halloween really not scary. So I'm hoping the Jersey Shore can connect me with a dead relative. Or a murderer, whichever's more terrifying.
Hello, it's so nice to meet you.
Thank you for having me.
I sensed you needed it. Good, you sat down. Okay, we're gonna start this. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, now before we start, I do have a couple of questions, okay? I need you to tell me.
That mediums are scammers who prey on your grief for money?
What is this? It's in my contract, no one can have bigger hair than me.
Adam, she's going to contact the dead for me. It's an age-old tradition.
It sure is. A tradition of faking it and ripping people off. Seances first became popular in America during the 19th century, when 3 young ladies named the Fox sisters started charging admission to watch them communicate with the dead.
If there be any ghosts in this room, may they knock. And if those ghosts think people should give us money, also knock.
As they grew up, the Fox sisters became bona fide celebrities, touring and holding packed sessions multiple times a day.
Sorry, darling, we couldn't possibly fit you in. We're talking to Shakespeare and Attila the Hun at noon.
But later in life, Maggie Fox spilled the beans and revealed how they tricked their public, making knocking sounds using an apple on a string and writing secret messages with their feet.
I feel the spirits. Wait for it.
Despite Maggie's confession, the spiritualism movement continued to this day, and modern mediums still make bank. Famous mediums even have best-selling books and hit TV shows.
Yes, TV shows that are totally real.
That's right, the higher the hair, the closer to heaven. Okay, enough chit-chat, let's start this reading. Oh yeah, I'm feeling something very powerful. Oh yeah, it's a presence. Did you lose someone with a J name, like a John, a Jack, a Julio?
Yes, my grandpa's name was Jason.
Bam, that's it. Okay. Oh, I'm feeling the pain. Oh yeah, in my chestal area. Is there any type of thing that happened in that region area?
Yes, he died of lung cancer.
Bada bingo, what you think about that, Mr. Everything, huh? Okay, so your grandfather's telling me, oh, something about a book. Why? Why?
I think he owned a book. And I saw it once.
That's it? That's it. He wants me to tell you he cherishes those moments and he loves you. Boom, shut up, I'm done.
That was amazing. How do you explain that?
Simple. She was doing a cold reading.
Who this? You're not a spirit. I did not summon you. Okay, can we cut?
This is Mark Edward. He's a magician who went undercover as a psychic medium to research how they scam people.
I used to do everything she does for a living, and I can tell you exactly how it's done. Cold reading is a series of questions and statements that mine you for information without you even knowing it. First, the medium lists common names to guess at a match, and they start with just the initials so that you fill in the blank.
Oh, yeah. I know tons of people with J names, and lots of them are dead.
Mediums then offer details which sound specific, but are actually quite generic. Chest pains could be lung cancer, heart disease, or really anything.
No, I sensed that he died because of something in the chest. Or the head. Huh? Definitely somewhere in the body.
Finally, she offered a question phrased like a statement to make you do the work and make a connection.
Honey, sugar, the book. It was real, right?
Actually, no. Grandpa hated books. Now that I'm thinking of it, I was thinking of his TV guide.
By using questions that could apply to anyone and judging your body language to see how you respond, mediums manipulate you into thinking they know things nobody else could know. And since they often work in group settings, if they don't get it right, they just move on to someone else in the room.
I mean, how about you, haircut? You know something about a book? No, somebody here must know something about a book.
Ugh, why did I ever buy this?
Well, cold reading often seems supernatural because it's a truly amazing skill. But that's all it is, a really good magic trick. And while there's nothing wrong with a little illusion, it is straight up unethical to take advantage of other people's grief for your own gain.
I've even seen people lose their entire savings because a medium convinced them to hand it over.
Oof.
You scammer! How do you even sleep at night?
Okay, calm down. Everyone just take a minute, close your eyes, okay, and just imagine smoke or whatever. Poof, I'm gone.
It's time for me to go too.
What?
Just kidding. It's an editing trick.
Okay, that was kind of funny. All right, so kind of keep that in mind the next time that you watch, the next time that you read your horoscope. They're fun. Don't take them super duper seriously. Or crystal ball gazers, palm readers, psychics, or mediums, or anything like that. So when we evaluate the trait perspective, and this is where we'll kind of start tying things up and finish this up on Monday. So one of the things that's kind of interesting is that we don't always behave the same way in different situations, do we? And so Walter Mischel actually very much pointed this out, that your personality is also a product of the situation that you find yourself in. So can anybody tell me if they've had an instance where they acted differently than they normally do? Odds are pretty good you can think of at least one instance or multiple instances, in fact. I know, for example, that when my grandmother passed away last year and I spent maybe a month or two grieving, I probably did not act the exact same way that I normally act right now. So we don't always behave the same way. But here's the thing, though. Traits still matter. Yes, there are going to be very scary moments where we don't behave the way that we normally would. But ultimately, your average behavior remains the same. And so this has been found with evidence of what we call consistency of expressive style. So somebody who is really enthusiastic or really energetic like me, they're going to move their hands around a lot. They're going to jump up and down when they're happy. I know you can't see it with the mask, but they make a lot of facial expressions. They smile a lot. And that is something that is pretty consistent. And it turns out that when you look at 2-second snippets of people, observers are actually very good at assessing personality with just 2 seconds worth of material. Even though we do occasionally change, in dire situations and our behavior is kind of different from what we would expect, we are able to do a pretty good job assessing personality. So how about one more slide and then we'll call it a day. So we're going to talk next about the social cognitive perspective. So it's all about the relationship between how the environment shapes your personality traits and how you think about things, and then you shaping the environment. So this is largely due to the work of Albert Bandura. You might remember Albert Bandura from our wonderful Bobo doll study, where you saw a small child pistol whip a clown because they watched an adult do it. Not a real clown, a toy clown. They wouldn't actually hurt anybody, but basically hitting a toy clown with a hammer just because they had seen an adult do it. And Bandura very largely believed that what is our personality and how we express ourselves is due to an interaction between the person and the social context that we find ourselves in. So I can kind of see this in my own life, and maybe you can see this as well. So I'm generally a pretty positive, upbeat person. And I do tend to find that when I'm around people who are a little bit more negative, and let's be clear, there is nothing wrong with being a negative person or being pessimistic. Everybody is going to be a little bit different, and it takes all kinds. But I do tend to find that when I'm around a group of people who are negative and complaining, I almost feel as if I have to amplify myself a little bit and amplify that positivity because of the environment that I am in. And odds are pretty good you might find that happening too. So we'll talk some more about how our personality amplifies or modifies the social context, and also how the social context shapes us next time. I'm looking forward to your projects. Remember that they are due on Monday. I will make sure it's a file upload option so you can put it on e-learning. And other than that, folks, have a great day. Have a good weekend. Make good decisions. And if you are quarantined, stay safe. I'm rooting for you. We only have a little bit more time of meeting in person, so be strong, be smart, take good care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I will see you here on Monday. Have a great day.